in order to grow in your lives, you need to be willing to make a change. You'll never grow or develop spiritually, emotionally, personally, if you stay where you're comfortable. You need to be willing to stretch beyond the limitations that you have for yourself. And I'm going to relate this back to Matthew chapter 14. It's the story where Peter steps out into the water, takes that leap of faith, but trusts in God to walk on water. A lot of times in our lives, we're not going to have all the answers, but we need to make decisions and trust in God when we may not necessarily know what the outcomes of those decisions are going to be. And I'll talk through some of the decisions that I've made and how I've made those decisions in my life. And it's really just to share some insight that hopefully you guys find helpful as you are evaluating career changes, moves, relationships, any area of your life, really. If you do find value in this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share it with a friend. So I'll start off with Matthew chapter 14, verse 29. It says, "Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus." So the first point that I have in this video is the call to step out. Just like us, Peter didn't wait for all the answers. When Jesus told him to come, he stepped out of the boat, even though the situation seemed impossible. And I'll talk a little bit about my life here. So in high school, I made the decision to transfer from my public school to a boarding school called Avon Old Farms. I was a junior in high school. I had a great sophomore and junior season playing varsity. And just to give you some context here, after my freshman season playing ball in high school, I made the decision that I wanted to do everything in my power to try and earn a Division I scholarship. So in order to do that, I came to the conclusion really that I needed to transfer in order to get the exposure that I was looking for. Where I was in my public high school, I didn't feel as if I was going to get that exposure or really had access to the things that would elevate my game. And so it was a tough decision. 15, 16 years old, living at home. Thankfully, my mom and my dad were able to support me extremely well while living at home. I was putting in all the work and controlling all the things that I can control on the field, and they were doing everything in their power to do the same for me, right? So my mom made me breakfast, lunch, dinner, came to school with snacks, was always, willing to pick me up or take me where I needed to go for training, dropping me off at the field. She did everything, and so did my dad, to put me in the best position. But ultimately, I knew that if I wanted to earn this Division I scholarship, that I needed to leave my public school. Sounds like a pretty easy decision to make, but again, being so comfortable living at home, it was a tough decision. I had, life was great. I didn't really have anything to complain about besides the fact that in my mind, I wasn't doing everything in my power to put myself in the best position to earn that scholarship. And so, again, not necessarily knowing what the outcome was, the way that I weighed that decision was that if I stayed, I know where my ceiling is. And if I leave, the worst case scenario is that I don't get an offer. The best case scenario is that I get an offer. I know that I'll get better exposure. I know that I'll have better access to workouts and training and facilities and all that, because the guys that were there were going to the Division I level and playing at a very high level. So ultimately, I made that decision. The verse that I'll relate this to is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. It says, "We walk by faith and not by sight." And at that time in my life, I had no idea that I was walking by faith. It was just a decision that I purely made based on football. But now looking back, I realize that God put me in that position. The second point that I have is that growth happens beyond your comfort zone, right? So Peter stepped into the unknown beyond the safety of the boat, which stretched his faith in the process. So the verse that I'll start off with here is Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And what I spoke about earlier, that comfortability often really deters us from making decisions that can potentially help us grow, develop, or change. And just because you're comfortable doing what you're doing doesn't necessarily mean it's the best decision for you. And with that said, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but you do have to evaluate options, especially if you want change in your life. The good example that I'll use here is going to the gym. If you go to the gym and just lift lightweight and don't really push yourself, you're not going to really see any results. But a guy who goes to the gym and pushes himself and, maxes out and is really doing everything in his power to really stretch, to put tension on his muscles, that's a guy who's going to see results. The same applies for our faith. Again, personally, spiritually, emotionally, all areas of our lives. The third point is to overcome fear and doubt. So when Peter walked out onto the boat, he started sinking because he focused on the storm instead of Jesus. Fear crept in because he doubted God's power in the moment. And so he walks out onto the water, and he gets scared. He's in the ocean. He walks off the boat and is basically walking on water, and he doubts God for a minute and starts sinking, but he immediately cries out for help, which I'll talk about that in the next point. But there's going to be fear and doubt that we face when making a change. It's just inevitable. Again, that stems from comfortability. When we're comfortable doing what we're doing, it's almost routine. And now there's this change that we have to transition into, just like Peter did. He was comfortable on his boat, but he took that leap of faith, and he's now walking on water. All of a sudden, he's now relying on something outside of his control to get him to God, right? And there's that doubt that sets in, and he starts sinking. And this takes me to my fourth point, is that God's faithful when we leap. Peter cries out, "Lord, save me," and Jesus immediately reaches out and catches him. Peter may have doubted, but Jesus didn't let him fall. And so the verse that I'll use here is Psalm 145, verse 18. The Lord is near to all who call on him. And whatever it is that we go through, you're never too far to come back to God. He's always going to be there for us, whatever we call. It's not too late. There's no decision that we'll make that will turn Jesus' head away from us if we give our lives to him and give him full commitment, repent for the things that we've done against him, and we're saved by God's grace ultimately. So the lesson here is that even when we falter, God is faithful to guide and uphold us. Taking the leap is never about perfection, but about trust. We need to trust in him when we take that leap. Whether you're transferring schools, changing careers, making a move, struggling with your faith, again, it comes down to taking that leap of faith, stretching beyond the limitations that you have set for yourself, and then trusting in God to get you through those times. If you guys found value in this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate your time.